Hello and happy Friday. My name is Jonna and I'm coming to you today from the Vancouver Public Library, which is located on the stolen homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. When we acknowledge the land, we hope that it gives us all an opportunity to reflect on the ongoing culture of genocide that has happened in our country over the years. Let's consider ways that together we can further incorporate anti-racism and decolonization into improving our communities. To find out whose land you're watching from, please visit www.whose.land/en. Now, as you know, today you're here watching Uncanny Tales. This program is designed for seniors and their caregivers across the country, and we hope that you can take a minute or two out from your busy day to sit together and enjoy the program. If you'd like a shout out or for us to say hey, please reach out to us using the program feedback form that's posted in the chat. Or you can always send us an email to programs@vpl.ca. Now today we have a very special guest reader on Uncanny Tales. Vancouver creative Jeff Cooper will be reading two stories. Jeff delivers and designs a podcast called The Mixed Project, which takes a deep dive into the history, the present, and the theoretical future of Black folks of mixed race. You can learn more about The Mixed Project and listen to episodes of the podcast by visiting the link in the chat. Today, Jeff will be reading two stories. The first story will be The Village Washer by Samuel Selvon, followed by The Soucouyant of the Hills by Angelo Bissessarsingh. Both stories fit well into the mystery and horror genres, and they do give us some good insight into how witchcraft and evil spirits have shaped Caribbean society. Without further ado, Jeff Cooper.
Greetings. My name is Jeff Cooper, and it is my absolute honor to be your host for this edition of VPL's Uncanny Tales. Today I'm going to be reading two short stories from my father's native country of Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago has a voodoo culture, similar to what we find in Haiti and in New Orleans. However, in Trinidad, it is referred to as obia, and has historically always been seen as evil and sinister and the work of the devil. Now, some of you may think that witches aren't always bad, and I may tend to agree with you. But it is my hope that in listening to these two stories, you will gain an understanding of how obia can be a great sense of hysteria in Caribbean communities. Both stories I'll read for you today feature one of obia's main spirits, something called a Sukunya. Now, Sukunya is like a vampire that during the day takes the form of an old woman. But during the night, Sukunya transforms into a ball of fire that whizzes along the countryside, looking for innocent people for their blood to suck. The first story I'm going to read for you is called The Village Washer, and it is written by one of Trinidad's most celebrated authors, Samuel Selvon. I hope you enjoy. Shortly after the war, the laundry situation took a turn for the worse in the village of Soucouyant, a sugarcane hamlet 30-odd miles from the capital of Port of Spain in Trinidad. Here, Ma Lambi ruled supreme as the only washer in the district, and in her sole supremacy, she grew careless after she'd established herself. Ma Lambi was old and black and possessed remarkable strength which seemed to bow her legs, so she walked like a duck. With the declaration of the war, she began to get neglectful of the collars and the sleeves and the folds at the bottom of trousers, which places the villagers always looked to judge her workmanship. If a button broke or came off as she scrubbed the clothing with a corn husk, she no longer bothered to mend it. And if a thin shirt ripped as she kneaded her gnarled hands through the cloth, she swore the tear was there before she got the shirt. Was a time when she used 4 bars of blue soap, and if dirt and perspiration were still stubborn, bought a bit of washing soda and did her best to get the clothes looking clean again. And was a time she used 4 to 6 buckets of water for 1 tub of washing. Now she used 4 buckets for 2 tubs. Ma Lambi had 4 flat irons, which she heated in a coal pot, wrapping a piece of cloth around the handle to protect her as she pressed the clothes. And a good job she did too, until the war started. Then she bought half the amount of coals and stopped greasing the irons with the lard when they were not in use. When she was ironing, she just sort of slid the hot iron around quickly, folded the clothes, and put them on top of a flat wooden tray, and took them around on her head on Saturday to deliver the laundry. However, Malambi's excuse was that there was a war on, and but that didn't stop the villagers from complaining. There were about 40 of them living near the cane fields where they worked, cutting the canes to be transported to the sugar mill 2 miles away. Of these, about 10 did their own washing, and the rest depended on Malambi. But the old woman paid no attention to the complaints. She always promised to do better the following week. But when she came around balancing the tray on her head, customers discovered all the dirt under the collars. And once a merino was so torn that the owner's wife asked if it was a net to catch fish in the river, and refused to pay. Malambi was unperturbed. In fact, she was brazen enough, as one villager put it, to announce that she was raising the laundry prices. As you know, she told the woman, as she stopped at each hut to collect the dirty linen, we fight in a war, and the prices of all things have to go up. So from now on, I will have to charge more to do up the clothes. Long time shirt was 12 cents, now it have to be 18 cents. And long time skirt was 18 cents, now it have to be a shilling. From hut to hut, as Malambi passed, words flew furiously. Anybody hear about Malambi? How she charging more to do up the clothes now? You can imagine that? And look how careless she getting, not even bothering to sew up a button or sew up a tear. Yes, it's true. I only wish we had another washer in the village. She is the only one, and that's why she getting on so. Well, I, for one, going to try and do the washing myself, if I have the time in the evening. The woman must be mad or something. She said the war caused it, but what war is she talking about? A delegation of housewives visited Malambi, where she lived in a broken-down hut under a mango tree. And there was an argument that lasted for 2 hours. At the end of that time, women retreated, making threats and shaking their fists at Malambi, who had told them flatly that they could do their own nasty washing if they didn't like her terms. She lost 5 customers the following week, but the others were forced to put up with her conditions. Malambi smiled to herself as she went about her washing. But while she was having her own way, word of the villagers' plight reached another hamlet called Donkey City, and another aged Negro woman named Ma Prokop migrated to Soucouyant with the hope of taking over the business from Malambi. The day Ma Prokop arrived, she was greeted with shouts and smiles, though the people were cautious not to commit themselves too much, fearing she might turn out to be a second Malambi. But Ma Prokop was a clever woman. The first day she put up a notice in the village shop, saying she was willing to take in laundry at pre-war prices. She said she was an experienced washer from Donkey City and was out to give complete satisfaction to one and all. It was a long notice, and the spelling was bad, and it wasn't worded exactly that way, but the 3 people in the village who could read saw it, and soon everybody knew. When Malambi heard about it, she waddled over to the shop and stuck a big piece of cardboard on which she had the village painter write a few words in red paint, stating that she was negotiating with a firm in the city for a new type of washing machine, which would make old clothes look like new. There was no electricity in the village, and it was a lie anyways. But for the first time in her life, Malambi was afraid of losing her trade. That Saturday, as she made her rounds, she did not even get a vest to wash. Within a week, she had lost all her customers. She was jeered at, and the new washing machine became a big joke. Even the children made fun of her, shouting, "Wash up, washa," whenever they saw her. If Malambi saw Ma Prokop walking down the road, she waddled over to the other side and turned up her head as if she was smelling something bad. She looked upon the intruder as a hated enemy and thought up means of recovering her trade, and at the same time putting Ma Prokop to such shame that she would have to go back to Donkey City in a hurry. At first, she started spreading lies. "You know," she told the old woman that she met by the shop, that new washer is a nasty woman. She don't even rinse the clothes. And she looks so sickly. Take care she don't spread disease in the village." But Ma Prokop's actions soon had the whole village on her side. She even spent a little of the money that she saved in Donkey City and worked late in the night, sewing on buttons and mending torn clothes. And she made it her business to be friendly to the children, buying them sweets and telling them stories. Ma Lambi now started a malicious rumor that Ma Prokop was an Obeah woman who changed herself into a blood-sucking animal in the night. The simple-minded villagers, quick to superstition and belief in omens and evil spirits, became uneasy as the rumor took root. One night, a wounded animal ran into a backyard and left a trail of blood. Next morning, Ma Lambi told them, It looked like Ma Prokop was working overtime last night. I don't know how you could let that Obeah woman live here. They began to imagine things. Night noises were attributed to an evil spirit, and though no one pointed directly at Ma Prokop, there was an uneasy air whenever she was around. Quick to see her advantage, Ma Lambi pressed home the fact that the new washerwoman was unusually fond of children, and that the little ones were the favorites of Obeah women. She did more than talk. One night she poured a gallon of poison onto the roots of a big silk cotton tree in the center of the village, and next day divined that as a result of Ma Prokop's evil deeds, the tree would die before a week passed. She began to make a study of black magic in order to set the village against Ma Prokop. She collected an old miscellany of liquids and bones and other paraphernalia and cleared her hut of mirrors and all objects in the sign of the cross. Things came to a head when the silk cotton tree died. It just withered up, as Ma Lambi had predicted, and within 2 weeks it was nothing but a standing skeleton. The village women got together to discuss the situation. It happened just as Ma Lambi said. It looked like Ma Prokop is really a Obeah woman. We have to push she to the test. Get she to look in a mirror and make the sign of the cross over she head. If she really is an Obeah woman, she can't stand that at all. Ma Prokop, in the meantime, was well aware of what was going on in the village, yet she did nothing, except that one morning she went to Donkey City and came back with a parcel under her arm and a small smile on her lips. 2 days later, on a hot, sunshiny morning, a group of housewives came into Ma Prokop's yard as she was hanging out the laundry on a makeshift line between 2 mango trees. Ma Lambi was not among them, but while they were foregathering, she had been telling them exactly what to do. Look in she house. I bet you wouldn't see any mirrors. And I bet you would find a lot of funny things in the house, like bone and bird feather and bottles, and you might even find a skeleton. For Ma Lambi had done what she thought would be the most damning thing. She had sneaked into Ma Prokop's house and hidden all the stuff with which she had been practicing her own evil acts, and she had removed the only mirror in the room and a small crucifix near the head of the bed. Ma Prokop hung out a pair of khaki trousers and turned around to the women. They got to the point right away. Ma Prokop, the leader said, we hear that it is you working Obeah in the village and causing evil spirits to walk around in the night. What nonsense you talking about? She put her hands on her hips and looked outraged. Well, anyway, we going to search your house. They left her standing there and went into the hut. A minute later, bottles and bones came hurtling out the window. It's true, the woman came tumbling from the hut in fear. You really work at Obeah? Look at all these things we find in your room. Ma Prokop recovered quickly at this unexpected development. All the things you see here, she waved with her hands to the ground, they don't belong to me, I swear. She made the sign of the cross with her 2 fingers and kissed it loudly. They belong to Ma Lambi. I assure you she who put them there. Because she's so spiteful since I come to the village and take away all the washing. The women began murmuring among themselves. Then suddenly one of them came forward and shoved a mirror in Ma Prokop's face. With a deliberate calm, the washer said, "Thank you," and she fixed a piece of colored cloth she wore on her head, looking straight into the mirror. Then, as if in a rage, she pulled the mirror and dashed it to the ground. That is the true test, one of the group members whispered. If she really Obeah woman, she can't look in the mirror. Ma Lambi must be telling lie. It looked as if Ma Prokop not guilty. Ma Prokop caught the turning of the tide. Listen, she said, let we all go over to Ma Lambi and give she the test. with a mirror and a cross. I have just what we need. Hide away inside. Give me just a chance to go and get it. She dashed inside and came back with the parcel she had brought from Donkey City. She took the lead, heading straight for Malambi's hut. You Malambi, she shouted as they got into the yard. You fooling people saying it's I who's working Obia, when the whole time it is you. Come out to the yard and let me test you. Malambi came charging out of the hut. What do you mean keeping so much nose in my yard? She demanded. She tried to keep a steady face, but she knew that something had gone wrong. Look, we have a mirror and a cross, Ma Prokop loosened. Look, we have a mirror and a cross. Ma Prokop loosened the parcel and stepped ahead of the group. She moved quickly and turned the mirror full in Malambi's face, at the same time lifting the cross over her head. No one heard the strange word Ma Prokop was fiercely whispering, and the weird glint in her eyes, but everyone saw Malambi cower in fear, and a look of extreme terror come upon her face. Then, clasping her hands in her head, she turned and ran, shrieking into the hut. Ma Prokop turned to the frightened villagers. Nothing more to worry about, she said in a tone of authority as she wrapped the mirror and cross into a parcel again. You will never have any Obia here for as long as I stay in this village. The next morning, Ma Prokop stood by her house, watching Malambi take the road to Donkey City, all her belongings wrapped in a sheet which she had slung over her shoulder. As the woman looked back for a last glimpse of Sans Souci, she caught the sight of Ma Prokop leaning on the fence, watching her. With a yell of terror, she wallowed after her long shadow cast by the morning sun. Thank you. The second story I'm going to be reading for you once again features a Sukunya, this spirit of Obia. And it is written by another one of Trinidad's most celebrated authors, an author named Angelo Bissessarsingh. The name of the story is The Sukunya of the Hill. Hope you enjoy. Come, Felix, mommy baking pone. I want to get a piece before it get cold, called Boy to his playmate. Your mommy pone does be light like cake. I want piece too, returned the small boy in the ragged calico shirt and short khaki pants which had been cut down from a pair of men's old trousers. Racing along the dusty white marl road that bisected the tiny cocoa planting community of Buenos Aires, the two darted to the little wooden shack with the thatched roof that Boy called home. Ma, you done bake yet? I want piece of pone and one for Felix too, called Boy as they clambered around the woman who was bent over a coal pot. A metal box sat atop a brazier of glowing charcoal, and this served as a bake oven. 2 tin pans of hot, delicious cassava pone stood on a small wooden table covered in oilcloth. "Oh, go on, all your cheer on licorice, eh?" exclaimed Miss Jenny, her handsome brown features somewhat careworn, but still showing signs of the time when she was reckoned a great beauty. Since her husband had died 4 years earlier and left her alone to raise her young son, she eked out a living selling pone, tulum, sugar cake, guava cheese, and other local confectionery from a tray under the awning of Chin's shop. Slicing 2 generous portions and putting them onto 2 dried slivers of banana leaves, she laughed as Boy and Felix demolished her handiwork. Boy was a good-looking little fellow. His copper skin he had inherited from his father, who was Coco Pañol from the Venezuelan main, who came like hundreds of his countrymen to work the estates of wealthy property owners in Trinidad. The bushy hair he had from his Afro-Trinidadian mother. Short and hardy, he was bright too, and did well at the village school, where he was in good standing with the headmaster. Although he was like many young boys and indulged too often in pranks and jests they knew too well. "Come, boy," Miss Jenny said. "When you done, Felix, go home. I'll show your mother have something she need help with. Boy, you stay here with me and help me get these things ready for tomorrow." "All right, Ma," choked Boy as he stuffed his mouth. "Felix, I go see you tomorrow. Let me go up the spring and see if we can find some sapadilla." "Sound good, Boy. Thanks for the pone, Miss Jenny, and good evening." Felix was the son of the village seamstress. Boy set about helping his mother cut small squares of a stack of green banana leaves on the earthen floor. These would serve as wrappers for the goodies she made. Boy was mature beyond his years and realized that he was the man of the house. When his father had died of a broken neck after falling out of a mango tree, his sense of responsibility grew and never waned. Boy was a great help to his mother, whom he realized denied herself many things so she could put clothes on his back, school books in his satchel, and food on the table. The next day after school, he and Felix convened on an assault on the juicy sapodillas which abounded near the spring. Miss Jenny had taken up station outside of Chin's shop, where a Friday afternoon crowd of loiterers, women doing shopping, and drinkers had gathered. Dutiful son that he was, Boy returned early enough from the sapodilla raid, and helped his mother by carrying the wooden bench upon which she would sit and balance a tray of her delicacies on her head, which was wrapped in a colorful handkerchief. Upon arrival at the shop and the many exchanges Miss Jenny had with the other women in the village, she caught up on village gossip and the raucous banter that defines life in the Caribbean, when suddenly a hush fell upon the assembly. The reason for this sudden silence was the arrival of a bent, withered crone known to all as Maturi. She was arched almost at a right angle to the ground. Her skin was like weathermora wood, in which 1,000 wrinkles ran like streams. From under her broad straw hat, white hair showed, tied in a bun. She was attired in a tattered black gown of a design long dead. Her clawed feet gripped the dirt like the talons of some great predatory bird, and her shriveled hands bore the same claw-like appearance. What really caught the attention of the observer, however, were her eyes. From either side of her hooked nose, a pair of reddish orbs burned like live coals. Maturi had a way of fixing them on a person which would melt the greatest show of bravado. No one, not even old Mr. Gonzalez, who had long passed his 80th year, could tell you how long Maturi had been alive. Nothing was known of her family, her background, or even her real name. She never appeared on any of the official lists at the warden's office in Erin, and made no attempts to form bonds with the other villagers, or even speak more than the barest of sentences in a highly pitched voice, which had a crack like a fractured crockery. It was known that she lived in a tiny hut, up in the high woods, under the shadow of a ridge called Devil's Mountain. How Maturi lived, nobody knew or even cared. She only showed up in Buenos Aires a couple times a year, and never bought anything at Chin's shop. Her dress was always the same. She seemed to have no way of earning a living. Her periodic advent had since anyone could recall, been an omen of bad luck. On the last occasion, Foolish Ben, one of the cocoa pickers on La Esmeralda estate, was drunk in Chin's shop. Maturi was making her slow trek through the village, and in a fit of rum-soaked mirth, Ben had spat at the old lady's feet and laughed. She had turned her fiery eyes upon him and glared before walking on without a word. Ben was not to cackle for very much longer. For that very same week, he had taken ill, and before a month had elapsed, he laid in the village cemetery at the crossroads. Dr. Ferdinand, the White District medical officer, had examined the corpse the morning it was discovered in bed, but could find no real reason for the passing. Now, as Boy and his mother set up her trays of sweets, Maturi again descended. Miss Jenny's back was turned to the road, and therefore didn't see the bent form. Neither did Boy. Miss Jenny was in the middle of a sweet piece of juicy bacchanal, chatting with Miss Brenda, the wife of the village shoemaker, and did not notice the ominous form passing near her. Nor did she notice the tremulous silence which had fallen on the gathering as she boisterously carried on. Miss Brenda, if I tell ya, the man gets so vexed with she. Her voice trailed off as she turned around, only to be frozen by the sight of Maturi standing right behind her like a carved statue of doom. Eyes flashing, and what seemed to be an affront to the usual fearful reverence that accompanied the aged one's procession. Miss Jenny's throat went dry as she beheld the old woman, who had the appearance of some great brooding bird. Much like the giant red-headed corbeau or vultures which hovered overhead when something was dead. Though it was only a moment or two, the time passed like an age before Maturi turned and continued her walk, dragging out each step as she plodded into the lengthening shadows cast by the setting sun. Even after she left, Maturi's presence seemed to have cast a pall on the usual festive mood of the Friday afternoon. Even Boy was cast down. He would have been enjoying himself in the company of his young compatriots, who had come with their mothers to do some shopping. Even when Miss Jenny had sold all her wares and had given him a few coins to indulge in some treats from behind the shop counter, Boy didn't seem any livelier. It is not for the young to brood needlessly over things which do not matter to them immediately. And for the rest of the weekend, he spent in a healthy environment of outdoor play. Boy and Felix went down to the beach in Puerto Grande to see the muscled boatmen hauling in the seine, and by adding their small strength to the work, both boys were rewarded with some small fish by the smiling warriors of the sea. Boy took his catch home, intending to ask his mother to make it into a savory fish broth with dumplings. But when he arrived at the small house, he realized instantly that something was wrong. Like all those inured to hard work, Miss Jenny could never be found in repose as long as there was daylight. Every minute of her waking hour was spent in some chore or preparing the delicacies for which she was so well known. Yet on this warm Saturday afternoon, with golden sunlight still playing in the treetops, Boy found her confined to the coconut fiber mattress on the floor, which she called a bed. The patched sheet that served as a blanket was drawn up to her chin, and her entire frame trembled, as if plagued with some inner chill. Ma, what's wrong?" inquired Bory, in a fit of anxiety. "You sick of something?" Not wanting to cause her child any unnecessary worry, Miss Jenny replied in a subdued voice, "No, son, it's okay. I just feel a little weak, that's all." Boy looked at his mother trembling under the counterpane and was racked with worry. Sunday morning brought no improvement. Miss Jenny was even more pallid and feeble than she ever was. Traditionally, the routine would have been to have an early breakfast, then get dressed in their best, and the mother and son would attend Mass in a little Roman Catholic chapel in Erin, 7 miles away by foot. Looking at her, Boy knew that there was no question of such a walk. He was a self-sufficient lad and set about tidying the house and preparing some hot tea for his mother. But all she wanted to do was sleep. There was no hope of going to the doctor either, since the only medical man was Dr. Ferdinand at Erin, and most likely he was out in his horse-drawn buggy, having drinks with Mr. Higgins, the big white landowner in Rancho Quemado, and would not be at home. With a feeling of helplessness, he went to Miss Brenda, who lived a short distance away, and asked her to come look at Miss Jenny. The neighbor came as requested at once. Her startled expression gave away just how much Miss Jenny had deteriorated since they last met at the shop. Asking Boy to watch over his mother for a bit, Miss Brenda left and returned with a small bundle that contained a supply of those herbs which country folk refer to as bush medicine. Brewing an infusion of these required no more than steeping the wisps and leaves in an enamel cup of hot water. Miss Brenda knelt alongside the mattress and lifted her upright with her strong arms and made the latter drink the brew she had prepared. Miss Jenny could manage no more than a few sips in her weak condition. Miss Brenda stayed with her friend most of that Saturday, since her own big daughter and sons could prepare lunch. She cooked the fish broth, which gave some nourishment to Miss Jenny and Boy. Miss Jenny recovered enough for them to carry on a conversation in whispered tones, although Boy managed to catch a few words like devil woman, maturi, and obia. When the shadows of evening began to fall, she had to return to her own home, but Miss Brenda reached into the bundle once again and withdrew a tiny silver crucifix that she laid on the counterpane over the dozing form of Miss Jenny. From a small glass vial, she had anointed the sleeper and around the mattress with a few drops of water while saying a prayer under her breath. Boy, your ma very sick. You have to watch for she tonight, and if anything happen, you must tell me in the morning, eh? Miss Brenda said in a gentle tone. Yes, Miss Brenda. Boy made ready for sleep. He checked his mother to ensure she was comfortable, and then went close to the shutters of one of the windows in the hut, and then went and closed the shutters to one of the windows in the hut. The shutters were merely two slabs of undressed wood, which did not lock together but were simply held close by their irregular edges when joined. A firm push was all that was needed to open them. Nobody in the village locked their doors or windows anyway, since there was little to steal, and everyone knew everyone. The close warmth of the darkness enveloped the little home as Boy laid himself on his bed of sacks behind a curtain of the same material which was the wall of his makeshift bedroom. Unable to sleep at first, he kept his vigil until slumber began to weigh his eyelids. Long hours must have passed before he was awakened by a noise. It was almost inaudible, sounding like the scratching of a mouse against the rotted floorboards. Pulling aside the curtain ever so slightly, he saw that someone with a bright light, possibly a flambeau, stood outside the door because he could clearly discern the flicker of naked flames, which were then completely extinguished. The scratching he had heard appeared to stem from someone fumbling with the shutters in an attempt to pry them open. Boy was a brave lad by nature and sprang from his pallet of sacks. There was no fear in him, since he knew that he was the man of the house. A small, sharp cutlass lay on the kitchen table. Normally it was used for splitting coconuts, but now, in Boy's hands, it was a weapon. Silently sidestepping his sleeping mother, he placed the tip of the blade against one of the shutters, where he had heard the noise. With a sudden thrust with all his might, Boy pushed against the haft of the cutlass, and the twin boards rocked open. Whatever was trying to gain access to the house was obviously standing very close to the window, because in the violence of the push, Boy also knocked back a dark mass which hissed like an angry snake. The astonished lad had to shield his eyes because a flaming inferno erupted mere feet from him that blinded Boy temporarily. He fell backward, dropping the cutlass on the floor. The noise of the commotion barely stirred Miss Jenny, whose deep sleep was almost comatose because of her weakened state. Morning came and Miss Brenda arrived with a basket of good food, intending to make hearty stew for her sick neighbor. She encountered Boy sitting on a box near the window, cutlass in hand and fighting off sleep. In jabbered tones, he told Miss Brenda all about what had occurred during the night. The woman listening knowingly. She prepared some food and packed off Boy to school, promising to stay with Miss Jenny until he returned. When Boy returned to his house after a tense school day, his comrade Felix was in tow. Miss Brenda was not alone in the house. 5 men, including Mas Johnny, Miss Brenda's shoemaker husband. All wore a grim look and were armed with cutlasses and shod in heavy leggings as if ready for a hunting trip in the bush. They spoke in whispers until Miss Brenda turned to Boy. Boy, you better sleep in now. She feeling plenty better and eat something today. She need plenty rest though. I make some bakes and tea for you for supper. Eat now and come stay by she. I have to go home and cook for my children. Boy was about to inquire about the men, but in those days, children obeyed their elders without question. Before leaving, Miss Brenda once again placed the silver crucifix on Miss Jenny, this time around her neck as it was provided with a string. Going to all the windows and the doors, she anointed them with her vial of water, all the time muttering incantations which sounded like prayers. Boy, you see that you keep the door and the window closed tight, huh? Miss Brenda ordered. Your mom will be all right. Itching with curiosity and perhaps some fear, Boy watched the men file out of the house along with Miss Brenda. She took Felix along with her too, since it was likely he needed to be at his own house. He had no doubt that something sinister was afoot and that the men were recruited for a very serious purpose. Sitting on the floor alongside his sleeping mother, he was torn between an intense desire to follow them on their mission and a duty to remain home. Considering that Miss Jenny had taken food and was under the holy protection of Christ, thanks to Miss Brenda, Boy gave in to the first urge. Donning a pair of old canvas shoes and taking the cutlass with him, he made sure that the door and the window of the hut were secure and then ran pell-mell in the direction of the men. They were just leaving the village and were turning into a little forest trace which led up into the cocoa wood and past the spring into the dense foliage of Devil's Mountain. Boy took care to traverse quietly. Boy took care to traverse quietly, since he wanted to remain undetected. The long shadows of evening had already begun to fall when the procession halted for a muffled conference. Apparently, a course of action was being plotted. The meeting over, the men, led by the stalwart form of Mass Johnny, picked up the trail again. It was in darkness over an hour later that they halted near a small clearing in the bush. The night song of the forest denizens seemed hushed there. The hoot of the owls, the chirp of the crickets, and the clicks of flying bats were not to be heard. In the center of the clearing was a broken-down hut. Rotted slabs of wood formed a rough, oblong shape, which was covered in thatch. The men gathered in silence, in a knot, and seemed to be waiting for something to happen. The bright light of the moon peeked forth from behind a cloud and showed the arcane form of Maturi as she emerged from the black doorway of the hut. Hideous to behold at any time, she was now stark naked. The strong men seemed cowed by the apparition and seemed to stop breathing altogether as she went behind the hut out of view. All of a sudden, the glare of naked flame illuminated the clearing, and as a ball of fire rolled forth over the trees and across the hills towards the village. Boy let out a small whimper, which caused the obviously frightened menfolk to turn on him. "Boy, what the hell you doing here?" growled Mass Benny, who was the village wheelwright. "Please, Mass Benny," stammered Boy in a very small voice. "I did just want to see what all you're doing." Mass Benny, muscled like a bull, seemed to be toying with the idea of a sound licking when Mass Johnny intervened in low tones. "It's all right, Benny. Let the boy be. He done come this far, but he can't stand back alone in the dark. Boy, listen. Whatever happened here tonight, you must not tell. If you see something, keep it to yourself. You understand?" Boy nodded in the affirmative, and the watchers resumed their village. The watchers resumed their vigil. Mass Benny carried a kerosene lantern, but he did not light it. Time seemed to crawl as the group watched and waited. No one seemed to move a muscle until Mass Johnny rose and motioned to the others. With noiseless footsteps, they edged to the back of the hut with Boy in tow. A large wooden mortar, like the kind the village women used to pound plantain and cassava, stood alone. A horrible smell like that of fresh blood rose from the inside. Gingerly, Mass Johnny reached in and withdrew the greasy mass of what seemed to be human skin. The other men recoiled in fear, but Mass Benny stepped forward and from his pocket took a small cloth bundle. He unwrapped a bottle of red scorpion pepper and stopped with brown paper and a parcel of salt. While the others watched trembling, Mass Benny lit his lantern. Rolling out the slimy, wet thing on the ground, Master Johnny took the pepper sauce and salt, and he sprinkled liberally on the pink underside. Ever so carefully, he replaced the skin in the mortar, just the way he had found it. At a signal from his hand, Mas Benny and the rest retreated to their original hiding place and extinguished the lantern. They did not have long to wait before the ball of fire returned and descended on the hut. Seconds seemed like hours until the darkness was pierced with a shriek so horrific it seemed to echo across the hills. Kin, you not know me? Kin, you not know me? The almost inhuman voice screamed over and over again. Boy could just make out in the moonlight a bent shape which contorted and twisted as if in the grip of unforgivable pain. Eduardo, you stay here with Boy and make sure he ain't follow me, Master Johnny commanded the youngest man of the group. The rest of you, take the name of the Lord in all your mouth and follow me. Like great primal beings, the men rose and unsheathed their cutlasses as they moved towards the dancing creature in the clearing. Boy covered his ears and clung to the clung to the lank figure of his guardian in a vain attempt to block out the cries that seemed to burn into his brain. Cries which were still in until there was only sound of chopping, a dull thudding noise, like that he heard when Mr. Gonzalez, the butcher from the village, was selling pork on a Saturday morning. The clearing was once again brightened by flame, but this time it was from the fire which engulfed the hut and its contents. The pulpy mess around which the men stood was delicately covered in burning thatch and consumed with fire, with the wooden mortar. Boy must have fainted then, because he has no recollection of the trip home, save that when he awoke the next morning, Miss Jenny was sitting next to him, awake and in obviously good health. Miss Brenda was with her and smiling as well. A hearty meal of saltfish and dumplings was set before the boy, who devoured it ravenously while he was coddled by his mother. If you journey to the little village of Buenos Aires today, the old shop still stands, and it is still as sleepy as ever. Cocoa still grows, but not as much as before. Perhaps there is still some venerable resident whose memory may be jogged with a little rum to recall how the Sukunya of Devil Mountain was finally put to rest. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in today and for joining us for today's episode. Remember, if you'd like a shout out or you'd like to send one to someone who's watching, please feel free to email us at programs@vpl.ca. If you loved what you saw today, please fill out the program feedback form in the chat and let us know what you loved and what you think we could maybe do better. Now for some upcoming events. I'm very happy to announce that we do have a Screen from Home event starring the movie If Beale Street Could Talk. You can screen this film in the comfort of your own home. It's part of our Black Voices film series, and you can basically use a special login. You choose what time you want to watch the film on the day that it's provided. So that's going to be happening on Tuesday, September the 7th. It happens all day long. Do check out the link in the chat if it's something that interests you, and be sure to register. We also have a fantastic online program coming up. It's all about cooking. It's called the Cook and Tell. Do you love cooking? If you want to share your favorite recipe or learn tips and tricks from your peers, this is the program for you. Join us for a lively discussion at the Cook and Tell September Soup, where we will discuss our favorite soup recipes and explore all the cooking resources that VPL has to offer. That's going to be happening on Wednesday, September the 8th from 10:30 till 11:30 a.m. Be very happy to see you there. And finally, tune in for our very next episode of Uncanny Tales, which will air on September the 17th, where I will be reading The Garden Party by Catherine Mansfield. I look forward to seeing you then. Once again, that's Uncanny Tales happening Friday, September the 17th from 10 till 11 a.m. For more information and programs, events, and services, please visit us at www.vpl.ca. Thanks for tuning in.